Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you never saw the betrayal coming? Have you ever been told that your pain, your suffering, your trauma was just a joke that you should laugh off? Well, let me tell you what happened to me, and I promise you, this story will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty, about forgiveness, and about knowing when enough is truly enough. My name doesn't really matter for this story, but what does matter is that I survived something that could have killed me. Something that was caused by the one person who was supposed to protect me, supposed to love me unconditionally, my sister Sarah. And before you judge me for what I did, before you think I went too far, or that I should have just let it go, I need you to understand the full picture. I need you to walk with me through every painful step of this journey, to feel what I felt, to understand why I made the choices I made. Because this isn't just about a prank gone wrong. This is about years of being made to feel small, years of being told that my feelings didn't matter. Years of watching someone get away with hurting me while everyone around us smiled and pretended everything was fine. So buckle up, because this story gets dark, it gets painful, and it gets real in ways that might make you uncomfortable. But it's my truth, and I'm finally ready to share it. I grew up believing that sisters were supposed to be best friends, that the bond between siblings was unbreakable, sacred even. My parents certainly reinforced that idea every single day of my childhood. But here's what they never told me. What I had to learn the hard way through years of small cruelties and big betrayals. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who hurt you the most. And sometimes family is just a word people use to manipulate you into accepting treatment you would never tolerate from anyone else. Sarah was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I was born, I think she resented my existence. I don't remember a time when she was kind to me, not genuinely. There were moments, sure, when she would play the role of the caring older sister in front of our parents or her friends, but the second we were alone, the mask would slip, and I would see the cold disdain in her eyes. When I was 5 and she was 8, she convinced me that our parents were planning to give me away because I was too much trouble. I cried for hours, terrified that I was going to lose my family, while she sat there with this satisfied smile on her face. When our mom found me sobbing in my closet, Sarah told her I was just being dramatic, that we had been playing pretend and I had gotten too into it. Mom believed her, of course. She always believed Sarah. That became the pattern of our relationship, this twisted dynamic where Sarah would do something cruel. I would react with hurt or anger, and somehow I would end up being the problem. I was too sensitive, too dramatic, couldn't take a joke. Those phrases became the soundtrack of my childhood, echoing through every birthday party she ruined, every friendship she sabotaged, every achievement of mine she diminished. When I made the honor roll in middle school, she told me it was only because the teachers felt sorry for me. When I got the lead in the school play, she spread rumors that I had only gotten it because I had a crush on the drama teacher. When I started dating my first serious boyfriend in high school, she flirted with him relentlessly until he broke up with me to ask her out. And when I confronted her about it, crying and hurt and feeling so betrayed, she laughed in my face and told me I needed to learn to share. My parents did nothing. They told me that Sarah was just being playful, that siblings fight, that I needed to be more forgiving and less competitive with my own sister. The message was clear. Sarah's behavior was acceptable, and my pain was inconvenient. I tried to tell myself it would get better when we grew up, that maybe once we were adults and didn't have to live in the same house anymore, we could have a normal relationship. I held on to that hope like a lifeline through the rest of high school and into college. I even tried to rebuild our relationship when I was in my early 20s, thinking maybe we had both matured enough to move past the childhood drama. I invited her to dinner, tried to have real conversations with her, shared things about my life that I thought might help us connect. And for a while, it seemed like it was working. She would text me occasionally, ask how I was doing, even invited me to hang out with her and her friends a few times. I thought maybe, finally, we were becoming the sisters we were always supposed to be. But I was wrong. So incredibly, painfully wrong. Because Sarah hadn't changed at all. She had just gotten better at hiding her true nature, better at making her cruelty look like affection, better at gaslighting me into thinking that my discomfort with her behavior was my own fault. The truth is, she was just setting me up for something bigger, something worse than all the little cruelties of our childhood combined. And I walked right into it, trusting her, wanting so desperately to believe that my sister actually loved me. The day everything changed started out so ordinary that I sometimes torture myself by replaying it in my mind, wondering if there were signs I missed, red flags I ignored because I wanted so badly for things to be different. It was a Saturday in early June, one of those perfect late spring days where the weather is warm but not too hot, where everything feels alive and full of possibility. Sarah had called me the night before and asked if I wanted to come over to her apartment for a barbecue. She said she was having a few friends over and thought it would be fun if I joined them. I was surprised by the invitation because Sarah and I rarely hung out socially, but I was also excited. Maybe this was a sign that she really did want me in her life, that she was ready to be real sisters. I showed up at her place around noon with a bottle of wine and a fruit salad I had made that morning. When she opened the door, she gave me a big hug and told me how glad she was that I came. Her apartment was beautiful, decorated in that effortlessly chic way that Sarah always managed to pull off. There were already about 10 people there, most of whom I didn't know, scattered around her living room and out on the balcony. She introduced me around, and everyone seemed friendly enough, though I noticed a few exchanged glances that I couldn't quite read at the time. The first few hours were actually nice. We ate burgers and drank beer and chatted about nothing important. I started to relax, to let my guard down in a way I rarely did around Sarah. Maybe I had been too hard on her, I thought. Maybe people really do change, and I just needed to give her a chance to show me who she had become. Around 3 in the afternoon, Sarah suggested we all play a game. She had this excited energy about her, the kind that I had learned to be wary of when we were kids, but I pushed that instinct down. We were adults now. This was different. She explained that it was a kind of trust game where one person would be blindfolded and had to navigate an obstacle course while their partner gave them directions. It sounded harmless enough, maybe even fun. When she asked who wanted to go first, I volunteered before I could talk myself out of it. I wanted to show her that I trusted her, that I was willing to be vulnerable with her. She grinned and said she would be my partner, that she would guide me through it. Someone tied a bandana around my eyes, making sure it was secure enough that I couldn't see anything. I heard people moving furniture around, setting up what I assumed was the obstacle course. Sarah's voice was right next to my ear, warm and reassuring, telling me not to worry, that she had me, that this would be fun. She guided me forward slowly at first, her hands on my shoulders, telling me to take small steps, to move a little to the left, a little to the right. I could hear her friends laughing and cheering, and I found myself smiling under the blindfold, actually enjoying myself. This was nice, I thought. This was what having a sister was supposed to feel like. And then everything went wrong in a way that happened so fast I didn't even have time to brace myself. Sarah's voice told me to take 3 big steps forward and then stop. I did exactly what she said, trusting her completely. But what she didn't tell me, what she deliberately failed to mention, was that those 3 steps would take me right to the edge of her balcony, her second-floor balcony. And instead of stopping me, instead of protecting me the way she promised she would, I felt her hands on my back giving me a hard shove. For a split second, I was airborne, completely disoriented, not understanding what was happening. Then I hit the ground 12 feet below, and the world exploded into pain. I heard something crack, felt something inside me break, tasted blood in my mouth. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was the sound of laughter from above. My sister's laughter, high and delighted, as if she had just pulled off the funniest joke in the world. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed with no memory of how I got there. Every part of my body hurt in ways I didn't know were possible. My left arm was in a cast, my ribs were wrapped tightly, and I could feel stitches pulling at the skin above my right eye. A nurse noticed I was awake and called for a doctor. The next few hours were a blur of examinations and explanations. I had a compound fracture in my left arm, 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, multiple contusions, and what they delicately called internal bleeding that had required emergency surgery. The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive, that if I had landed differently, or if the ambulance had taken any longer to get there, I might not have made it. Lucky. That word felt like a sick joke. As the pain medication wore off and my head cleared, the memories came flooding back. The barbecue, the trust game, the blindfold, Sarah's hands on my back, the fall, the laughter. Oh God, the laughter. I asked the nurse if my family was there, and she told me that my parents were in the waiting room, but that they had been told I needed rest before I could have visitors. When she left the room, I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had happened to me, trying to understand how my own sister could have done this. My parents came in about an hour later, and the first thing my mother said to me was not, "Are you okay?" or "We were so worried," but rather, "Sarah feels terrible about the accident." Accident. That word hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my mother, trying to understand if she really believed that's what this was, or if she was just so committed to protecting Sarah that she was willing to rewrite reality. I told them it wasn't an accident, that Sarah had deliberately pushed me off the balcony. My father's face went hard, and he told me not to say things like that Sarah was devastated by what happened, and I was making it worse by accusing her of something so horrible. I tried to explain, tried to make them understand, but they kept interrupting me with their version of events. According to Sarah, I had gotten disoriented with the blindfold on and moved in the wrong direction. She had tried to grab me, tried to stop me, but I had moved too fast. It was a tragic accident, and she was beside herself with guilt. My mother actually had tears in her eyes as she told me how broken up Sarah was about it, how I needed to call her and tell her it wasn't her fault so she could stop blaming herself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My sister had literally pushed me off a balcony, and somehow I was being asked to comfort her about it. I told my parents to leave. My mother looked hurt, my father looked angry, but they left without another word. And I lay there in that hospital bed, alone and in pain, and I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. I was done. Done making excuses for Sarah. Done pretending that her treatment of me was normal or acceptable. Done sacrificing my own well-being to keep the peace in a family that had never protected me. Something inside me had broken when I hit that ground, and it wasn't just my bones. I spent 5 days in the hospital, and in that time, Sarah didn't visit me once. She sent flowers with a card that said, "Hope you feel better soon," with a smiley face, as if I had the flu and not life-threatening injuries that she had caused. My parents visited twice more, each time trying to convince me that I was remembering things wrong, that the trauma and the concussion were making me confused about what really happened. They suggested that maybe I should talk to a therapist about why I was so determined to paint Sarah as a villain when she had always been such a good sister to me. That's when I knew that they would never believe me, never take my side, never choose my truth over Sarah's lies. And honestly, that hurt almost as much as the physical injuries. To know that your own parents value maintaining a comfortable fiction more than they value your actual safety and well-being, that's a wound that goes deeper than broken bones. Have you ever felt completely alone even when you're surrounded by family? That's what those hospital days felt like for me. But that isolation also gave me clarity. I had time to think, really think, about what I wanted my life to look like going forward. And I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being Sarah's victim, being the family scapegoat, being told that my pain didn't matter. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I went home to my apartment, not to my parents' house like they had suggested. I needed space and time to heal without their constant pressure to forgive and forget. My best friend Maya came to stay with me for the first week, helping me with basic tasks that were impossible with one arm in a cast and my ribs still healing. She was furious about what had happened, had been from the moment she heard about it. Unlike my family, Maya believed me without question. She had witnessed enough of Sarah's behavior over the years to know exactly what my sister was capable of. One night, about a week after I got home, Maya sat down next to me on the couch and said something that would change the entire trajectory of what came next. She asked me if I had considered pressing charges. The thought honestly hadn't occurred to me. In my family, you didn't involve outsiders in family business. You certainly didn't call the police on your own sister. But Maya made a compelling argument. What Sarah had done wasn't just mean or hurtful. It was criminal. I could have died. And if I didn't hold her accountable, what would stop her from doing something like this again? Either to me or to someone else. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Maya was right. This wasn't about revenge or being vindictive. This was about justice, about standing up for myself in a way I had never done before, about saying clearly and publicly that what happened to me was not okay. So I made an appointment with a lawyer, a woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in personal injury cases. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to accomplish with legal action, but I knew I needed to explore my options. Patricia listened to my story without interrupting, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said something I'll never forget. She told me that in all her years of practicing law, she had seen a lot of family dysfunction, but what Sarah had done to me was particularly egregious because of the psychological manipulation involved. It wasn't just that she had physically harmed me, it was that she had used my trust, my desire for a relationship with her, as a weapon. Patricia explained that I had grounds for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. The criminal charges would be assault, possibly even attempted murder depending on how the prosecutor wanted to handle it. The civil lawsuit would seek compensation for my medical bills, my lost wages from missing work, my pain and suffering, and punitive damages to punish Sarah for her actions and deter similar behavior. The medical bills alone were staggering. Even with insurance, I was looking at over $40,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. I had used up all my sick leave at work and would be going without pay for at least another month while I recovered. The financial burden of what Sarah had done was crushing, on top of the physical and emotional trauma. I told Patricia I needed time to think about it. Part of me still felt guilty for even considering taking legal action against my sister. That's how deeply ingrained the family programming was. But another part of me, a part that was growing stronger every day, was angry. I was angry at Sarah for hurting me. I was angry at my parents for enabling her. I was angry at myself for putting up with it for so long. And I was tired of being the person who always backed down, who always made herself small to avoid conflict, who always forgave without ever receiving an apology or seeing any change in behavior. Over the next week, I did a lot of soul-searching. I talked to Maya, I talked to my therapist, I talked to a few other friends who knew the history between Sarah and me. Everyone except my parents supported me taking action. And that's when I made my decision. I was going to hold Sarah accountable. I was going to stop protecting her from the consequences of her actions. I was going to choose myself for once, even if it meant blowing up my family in the process. Because here's the thing I had finally understood. My family was already broken. It had been broken for years. I had just been the only one pretending it was whole. I called Patricia and told her I wanted to move forward with both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. She started the process immediately, filing a police report on my behalf and beginning to gather evidence for the civil case. She subpoenaed medical records, got statements from the paramedics who had responded to the scene, and tracked down some of the people who had been at Sarah's barbecue that day. Turns out not everyone thought what Sarah had done was funny. A few of her friends had been horrified and had left immediately after I was taken away in the ambulance. One of them, a guy named Marcus, agreed to give a statement to the police about what he had witnessed. According to Marcus, Sarah had been planning the prank for days. She had mentioned it to a few people beforehand, saying she wanted to teach me a lesson about being too trusting, about always being so naive and innocent. She had specifically chosen the spot near the balcony for the trust exercise, had intentionally not put any padding or cushioning on the ground below, even though someone had suggested it. And when I fell, when I was lying on the ground bleeding and unconscious, Sarah had laughed. She had actually stood at the balcony railing and laughed before someone screamed at her to call an ambulance. Marcus's statement was damning. It proved premeditation, proved that Sarah had known exactly what she was doing and had intended to hurt me. The police took the case seriously, much more seriously than I had expected. They interviewed Sarah, who stuck to her story that it had been an accident, that she had tried to stop me from falling, but the physical evidence didn't support her version. There were no defensive wounds on her hands from trying to grab me, no signs that she had made any attempt to prevent my fall. And then there was the testimony from multiple witnesses who had heard her laughing afterwards, who had seen her taking photos of me lying on the ground before anyone called for help. Yes, you heard that right. Sarah had taken photos. She had pulled out her phone and taken pictures of my broken body like it was some kind of trophy. The police found those photos on her phone when they executed a search warrant. She had even shared them in a group chat with some of her friends, along with comments about how epic the prank had been and how she couldn't wait to see my face when I woke up and realized what had happened. Those messages, those photos, they made me physically sick when Patricia showed them to me. But they also erased any remaining doubt I had about pursuing this case. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This wasn't sisterly teasing taken too far. This was deliberate, malicious, and cruel. And Sarah felt no remorse whatsoever. She was proud of what she had done, at least until the consequences started catching up with her. The day I decided to confront Sarah directly was about 6 weeks after the incident. I had gotten my cast off the week before, and while I was still in physical therapy for my arm and dealing with lingering pain from my ribs, I was mobile enough to leave my apartment for more than just doctor's appointments. Patricia advised me not to contact Sarah while the legal proceedings were ongoing, but I needed to do this. I needed to look my sister in the eye and tell her exactly how I felt. Needed to see her reaction when I handed her the papers that would change both of our lives forever. I had been served with 2 separate legal documents that morning: the criminal complaint charging her with assault and reckless endangerment, and the civil lawsuit seeking $200,000 in damages. I put both sets of papers in my bag along with copies of my medical bills and the hospital invoice showing the $43,000 I owed even after insurance. Then I drove to Sarah's apartment, my heart pounding the entire way. I didn't call ahead. I wanted the element of surprise. I wanted to see her genuine reaction before she had time to put on a mask or craft a story. When Sarah opened the door and saw me standing there, she smiled. Actually smiled at me like nothing had happened, like the last time we'd seen each other she hadn't pushed me off her balcony. She said something about being glad I was feeling better and invited me in like we were friends getting together for coffee. I walked into her apartment and it all came flooding back. The barbecue, the trust game, the blindfold, the feel of her hands on my back right before she pushed. I had to take a deep breath to steady myself. Sarah was talking about something inconsequential, asking if I wanted water or tea, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. I interrupted her mid-sentence and told her we needed to talk. She must have heard something in my voice because her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly and sat down on her couch, patting the spot next to her like I would actually sit that close to her ever again. I stayed standing. I pulled out the hospital bill first and set it on her coffee table. She glanced at it and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe recognition that this wasn't going to be the conversation she thought it would be. I told her that this was what her prank had cost me in medical expenses, and that didn't even include the wages I had lost or the ongoing physical therapy I needed. She started to say something about how insurance should cover most of it, and I wanted to scream at how cavalier she was being about putting me in debt. Instead, I pulled out the second set of papers, the criminal complaint. I set it on top of the hospital bill and watched her face as she picked it up and started reading. The color drained from Sarah's face as she realized what she was holding. Her eyes got wide, her hands started shaking slightly, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw fear in her expression. She looked up at me and asked what this was, her voice higher than normal, almost childlike. I told her very calmly that those were criminal charges being filed against her for what she did to me. She immediately started protesting, saying it was an accident, that she didn't mean for me to get hurt, that this was insane and I was being ridiculous. I let her talk, let her spin her lies and excuses, and then I pulled out the final document, the civil lawsuit. I placed it on the table next to the other papers and told her I was suing her for $200,000 for assault, battery, medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, and emotional distress. Sarah's face went from pale to red, and suddenly the fear was replaced with anger. She stood up and started yelling at me, asking how I could do this to her, to my own sister, over an accident. She said I was being vindictive and cruel, that I was trying to ruin her life over nothing. Nothing. That's what she called my broken bones, my surgery, my near-death experience. Nothing. And that's when I finally lost my composure. I started yelling back at her, all the years of pain and hurt and suppressed anger pouring out of me in a torrent of words. I told her about every cruel thing she had ever done to me, every time she had hurt me and gotten away with it, every time our parents had chosen her over me. I told her that I remembered her hands on my back, remembered the force of her push, remembered her laughter as I lay bleeding on the ground. I told her about the photos she had taken, about the group chat messages bragging about what she had done. I told her that I had witnesses who heard her planning this, who saw her laughing, who knew the truth about who she really was, and I told her that I was done. Done being her victim, done making excuses for her, done pretending we were a normal family with normal problems. Sarah's anger deflated into something else, something harder to read. She sat back down and put her head in her hands. For a moment, I thought maybe she was going to cry, maybe going to actually show some genuine remorse. But when she looked up at me, her eyes were cold and calculating. She told me that if I went through with this, our parents would never forgive me. Our whole family would disown me. I would be alone. She said it like it was a threat, like it was supposed to scare me into backing down. But all I felt was a strange sense of relief, because she had just confirmed what I had always suspected. In my family, loyalty meant accepting abuse. Love meant being a doormat. And family was just a cage I had been trapped in my whole life. I told Sarah that I had already accepted that our parents would choose her over me, because that's what they had always done. I told her that I was willing to lose a family that had never really valued me anyway, if it meant standing up for myself and holding her accountable. I told her that she could threaten me, could try to manipulate me, could do whatever she wanted, but I wasn't backing down this time. And then I told her the thing that I knew would hurt her the most, because despite everything, I knew my sister and I knew what mattered to her. I told her that everyone was going to know what she did. The criminal trial would be public record. The civil lawsuit would expose every detail of her cruelty. Her friends, her coworkers, everyone in her life would know that she pushed her own sister off a balcony and laughed about it. Her reputation, the thing she had always cared about more than anything else, was going to be destroyed. And it was all her own doing. Sarah's face went through about 5 different expressions in the span of seconds. Then she did something I didn't expect. She started crying, real tears streaming down her face, and she begged me not to do this to her. She said she was sorry, that she didn't realize I would get hurt so badly, that it was supposed to just be funny. She reached for my hand, trying to pull me down onto the couch next to her, trying to make me comfort her while she cried. But I pulled away from her touch like it burned me, because I knew what she was doing. This was another manipulation, another performance, another attempt to make herself the victim so I would feel guilty and back down. And maybe once upon a time it would have worked, but not anymore. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Sarah called after me, her voice desperate now, asking me to please stay and talk about this, saying we could work it out just between us without getting lawyers and police involved. I stopped at the door and turned back to look at her one more time. I told her that she had her whole life to be a good sister to me, and she chose not to be. She had countless opportunities to show me kindness, respect, love, and instead she chose cruelty every single time. This wasn't about one incident. This was about decades of mistreatment culminating in an act that could have killed me, and I was done giving her chances she would never take. I walked out of her apartment and I didn't look back. My hands were shaking as I got into my car, adrenaline and emotion coursing through my body. But underneath all of that, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride in myself. I had stood up to Sarah, I had chosen myself, and it felt like freedom. The drive home was a blur. Maya was waiting for me at my apartment, and when I walked in, I just collapsed into her arms and cried. Not tears of sadness or regret, but tears of release. I had been carrying so much pain for so long, and finally, I was letting it go. The legal proceedings moved forward despite Sarah's attempts to get them dismissed. Her lawyer argued that it had been an accident, that there was no intent to cause harm, that the criminal charges were excessive. But the evidence was too strong. The messages on her phone showing premeditation, the witness testimony about her planning the prank, the photos she had taken of me lying injured on the ground, the complete lack of any attempt to help me or call for an ambulance until someone else forced her to. The prosecutor assigned to the case was a woman named Amanda Torres, who had a reputation for being tough but fair. She met with me several times to go over my testimony and prepare me for what was ahead. She was the first person besides Maya and Patricia who treated this with the gravity it deserved, who didn't try to minimize what Sarah had done or suggest that I was overreacting. Amanda told me that she had seen plenty of family violence cases in her career, but there was something particularly disturbing about the calculated nature of what Sarah had done. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of lost control. This was planned, executed, and celebrated. And that spoke to a level of callousness that suggested Sarah was a danger, not just to me, but potentially to others as well. My parents, predictably, were horrified when they found out about the criminal charges and the lawsuit. They called me repeatedly, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails begging me to drop everything and do the right thing. My mother actually showed up at my apartment one day, crying and saying that I was tearing the family apart, that Sarah had made a mistake but didn't deserve to have her life ruined over it. I tried to explain to her again what had really happened, tried to make her see that Sarah had deliberately hurt me, but she refused to listen. She kept saying that siblings fight, that Sarah didn't mean it, that I was being vindictive. Finally, I asked my mother point blank, if a stranger had done to me what Sarah did, would she want them held accountable? She stammered something about it being different, because Sarah was family. And that's when I realized that nothing I said would ever make my parents see the truth, because they were too invested in the version of reality they had constructed where Sarah was a good person, who just made mistakes, and I was the problem child who couldn't forgive. I told my mother that I loved her, but that I couldn't have a relationship with her if she was going to continue enabling Sarah and dismissing my trauma. She left in tears, and I haven't spoken to her since. That was 4 months ago. The criminal trial happened about 8 months after the incident. Sarah had pleaded not guilty, so it went to court. I had to testify, had to sit on the witness stand and recount every detail of what happened while Sarah sat at the defense table, looking sad and remorseful. Her lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive sister who was exaggerating an accident to get attention and money. He questioned my memory, pointed out that I had a concussion which could have affected my recollection of events, suggested that maybe I had moved in the wrong direction, and Sarah had tried to stop me. But then the prosecution presented the text messages, the photos, the witness testimony from Marcus and 2 other people who had been at the barbecue, and Sarah's own statement to the police, which contradicted several of the things her lawyer was claiming. I watched the jury's faces as the evidence was presented, and I could see their expressions change from skeptical to shocked to disgusted. When the photos of me lying on the ground were shown on the screen, several jurors looked away. One woman in the front row actually put her hand over her mouth like she was going to be sick. These were strangers who had no reason to take my side, who didn't know me or Sarah, and even they could see the truth of what had happened. It took the jury less than 3 hours to come back with a guilty verdict on all charges. Sarah was convicted of assault in the 2nd degree and reckless endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months, plus 5 years of probation and mandatory anger management and counseling. She was also ordered to pay restitution for my medical bills. Sarah sobbed as the sentence was read, and my parents, who had been in the courtroom every day of the trial supporting her, looked at me with such hatred that it actually made me flinch. But I stood my ground. I had told the truth. The jury had believed me. Justice had been served. The civil lawsuit was settled a few weeks after the criminal trial ended. Sarah's lawyer knew they couldn't win given the criminal conviction, so they negotiated a settlement. I didn't get the full $200,000 I had sued for, but I got enough to cover all my medical bills, my lost wages, my ongoing therapy costs, and a little extra for the pain and suffering she had caused. It wasn't about the money, really. It was about Sarah finally facing consequences for her actions. It was about someone in authority looking at the evidence and saying clearly and unequivocally that what she did was wrong. It was about validation after a lifetime of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, making too big a deal out of nothing. Now I had a jury verdict and a judge's sentence that proved I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been genuinely, seriously harmed by someone who was supposed to love me. And that recognition, that official acknowledgement of my pain, meant more to me than any amount of money ever could. Patricia hugged me after the settlement was finalized and told me she was proud of how strong I had been throughout this whole process. She said a lot of people in my situation would have backed down when their family pressured them, would have accepted the minimization of their trauma to keep the peace. But I had chosen myself, and that took courage. The aftermath of all of this has been complicated. I haven't spoken to my parents in months, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will again. They made their choice, and it wasn't me. That hurts in a way I can't fully articulate. There's a special kind of pain in knowing that your parents will sacrifice your well-being to protect your abuser. But I'm learning to accept it, learning to build a life that doesn't revolve around trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it to me freely. I've been in therapy twice a week working through not just the trauma of what Sarah did to me on that day, but the accumulated trauma of growing up in a family system that taught me my pain didn't matter. It's hard work, this healing. Some days I still struggle with guilt, still hear that voice in my head telling me I'm a bad person for destroying my family. But then I remember that I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending that the broken pieces fit together. My family was already destroyed by years of enabling abuse and prioritizing appearances over truth. I just finally stopped being complicit in the lie. I've had to learn who I am outside of the role I played in my family, outside of being Sarah's victim and my parents' disappointing daughter. And you know what? I'm discovering that I actually like the person I'm becoming. I'm stronger than I thought I was. I'm braver than I gave myself credit for. I'm worthy of love and respect and safety, and I don't have to accept anything less. Sarah is currently serving her sentence. I don't know how she's doing, and I don't particularly care. I hope she's getting the help she needs. Hope she's using this time to really examine her behavior and make changes. But that's not my responsibility anymore. I'm not her keeper, not her therapist, not her punching bag. I'm just someone who survived her and moved on. I have a new job now, one I really love. I've made new friends who actually value me and treat me with kindness. I'm dating someone wonderful who, when I told him my story, didn't minimize it or tell me I should forgive my family, but just held me and told me he was sorry that happened to me. I'm building a life that's mine, not defined by family obligation or childhood trauma, and some days that life feels really, really good. Do I miss having a family? Sometimes. I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments when I see other people with their siblings or their parents and feel a pang of loss for what I never had and now never will have. But mostly what I feel is relief. Relief that I don't have to walk on eggshells anymore. Relief that I don't have to accept cruelty disguised as love. Relief that I chose my own well-being over maintaining a toxic dynamic. And that relief, that peace, is worth more than any family relationship that requires me to sacrifice myself to maintain it. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, thank you for listening. Thank you for not judging me for taking my sister to court, for pressing charges, for refusing to just let it go and move on like everyone wanted me to. I know some people will think I went too far. That family should forgive family no matter what. That I should have handled this privately. But here's what I want you to understand. There is no private way to hold someone accountable when everyone around you is invested in pretending nothing wrong happened. There is no quiet way to stand up for yourself when your whole family is telling you to sit down. Sometimes the only way to get justice is to make noise, to refuse to be silenced, to demand that the truth be heard even when everyone around you wants you to keep the secret. And yes, there are consequences to that choice. I've lost my parents. I've been cut off from most of my extended family. I've been vilified by people who only heard Sarah's version of events. But I've also gained something invaluable: my self-respect, my dignity, my sense that I matter, that my life has value, that I don't have to accept abuse just because it comes wrapped in the word family. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? Have you ever had to set a boundary that people told you was too harsh, too extreme, too unforgiving? I want you to know that it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to say no to people who hurt you, even if they're family. It's okay to demand better treatment, to refuse to minimize your own pain, to hold people accountable for their actions. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You are not obligated to forgive people who haven't changed, who aren't sorry, who would hurt you again in a heartbeat if given the chance. And you are not cruel or vindictive for protecting yourself, for seeking justice, for saying enough is enough. This story has been hard for me to share because it's so personal, because it exposes the ugliest parts of my family dynamic, because I know some people will judge me for it. But I'm sharing it anyway because I think there are other people out there who need to hear that it's okay to not be okay with how you've been treated. It's okay to stop pretending that abuse is love. It's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're related to you by blood. If my story resonates with you, if you've been through something similar, or if you're currently dealing with a toxic family situation, I want you to leave a comment below. Tell me your story if you're comfortable sharing it. Let's build a community of people who chose themselves, who set boundaries, who refuse to be victims anymore. And if you're struggling with whether to take action against someone who hurt you, whether it's pressing charges or just cutting them out of your life, know that whatever you decide is valid. Only you know what you need to heal. Only you know what justice looks like for you. Trust yourself. Trust your pain. Trust that you deserve better. If this video touched something in you, if it made you think or feel or remember, please leave a like. It helps more people find this story, and maybe it will help someone else who needs to hear that they're not alone in what they're going through. And please subscribe to Living Through It for more real stories from real people who have survived things they never thought they could survive. We're building something special here, a space where we can be honest about the messy, complicated, painful parts of life without judgment, without minimization, without being told we're too much or too sensitive, or making too big a deal. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future stories, because trust me, we have some powerful ones coming up. Thank you again for being here, for listening, for making it all the way to the end of this very long and very personal story. Take care of yourselves out there, set those boundaries, and remember, you are worthy of love, respect, and safety, always.